I want to talk about stories and storytelling for a minute or two because it's something I'm really passionate about. When I was a child, people were telling stories all the time, and not just us children. They told stories about princesses and fabulous treasures and kingdoms in the desert and gin as big as a house. They even told stories about stories. I used to wonder why they told the stories. I loved them very, very much, but I thought it was a little bit crazy because they never ever stopped. And when we used to ask my dad, Idries Shah, why do you tell stories and why is everyone else telling stories? He used to tell us that these stories were a fantastic escape and an entertainment, but they were also a kind of matrix, a kind of system by which ideas and values could be passed on from one generation to the next. He regarded stories as a kind of encyclopedia to the world, a kind of skeleton key, a passepartout to a kind of thinking that has often been lost in the Occidental world. And he used to tell us that while we listened to stories, a kind of magical alchemy took place. When I was a bit older, I used to say to him, Baba, will you tell me how the stories worked? And sometimes he would try and explain, and he'd explain, that one thing, like in a Nasruddin story, that the donkey represented man's burden and Nasruddin represented wisdom. But then he used to often say that just like a car, you don't need to know how the engine works in order to go somewhere. And he would tell us that the power of stories, their kind of inner alchemy, if you like, is that the story seeds itself in your mind and is activated. All you need to do is to tell it or to listen. For my father, stories were a fantastic way to pass on ideas, as I say. But he regarded them, as a piece of fruit. He used to say to us that a great story is like a peach. The entertainment value, the thing that makes us laugh, the thing that we are so entranced by, is like the delicious flesh on the exterior, on the outside of the peach. And he would say the thing of real value, the stone of the peach, was like the real inner value, the moral of the story. But just like I say, just like the car's engine, he said we don't need to work out, we don't need to know how the whole thing fits together, because that's the fabulous magic of stories and storytelling, that they activate themselves in our minds. Something that I've been so interested in about having children of my own and watching them listen to stories that I've told is how they have developed and how they've developed or really become undeveloped with listening to stories. When a child is born and maybe 3 or 4 years old, it's very easy to captivate them with just the beginning of a story. Once upon a time, long, long ago in a far-off land, there lived a princess, and her name was Princess Esmeralda. Princess Esmeralda had been locked in a tower as tall as the sun is high by an evil, evil witch. If I tell that to a room full of children, okay, they'll be squirming and giggling maybe, but I will get them in a kind of hypnotic state if I do it right. And through that hypnotic state, I'll be able to pass on something of wisdom maybe. It'll be like the peach seed sown in their minds. But what I noticed was, with my own children, the older they've become, the less associated they are with kind of this default setting of humanity, because our ancestors throughout human history have learned through stories and storytelling in a way that is still done in the East, but is not really done in the West so much. I remember my son, Timur, when he was 4 years old, he was given a Superman costume, and he wore it every day for months and months and months. And I used to say to him, "Are you going to put on your costume today, Timur?" And he'd say, "Costume? What are you talking about? This isn't a costume." He would say, "Baba, I am Superman." And I'd say, "Yeah, right, okay." But as time went on, I realized, yes, this was the magical genius of fantasy and fantasizing. Timur was Superman. Yeah, maybe only in his own world, but he really was. And this is part of the default setting of humanity. My father used to say to us um, that the Western world had forgotten how to understand and make use of storytelling. And he would say that in the Victorian times, storytelling had been kind of denigrated to something for children. And I think it happened when these very beautiful, elaborate books, illustrated version of the Grimm's Tales came out, and others, of course. And of course, as the Arabian Nights filtered into less and less shocking editions and were published and found in European sitting rooms. My father used to say to us, though, that imagine a kingdom far, far away where nobody really knew about storytelling or stories or how they worked, or that they had many levels. And he would say, imagine a farmer's field in this kingdom. And imagine that one day, as the farmer is pulling his plough with his horses or oxen over the field, that he comes across a box. He digs it up, the plough hits it, and he stoops down and he uncovers the box from the soil, and he takes it into the town. And imagine, he would say, that in the town a crowd gathered and a lot of excitement took place as people looked at as the crowd craned their necks to try to get a glance of what would be in the box when it was opened. And he would say, imagine if the farmer then opened the box with a hammer, the end of a hammer, and everyone peering from the village, he looked inside. And my father would say, imagine if the farmer pulled out of the box a very beautiful slab, a very beautiful square board with some white squares and some black squares on it. And he would say, imagine if the farmer also pulled out these little figures in different shapes, a variety of different shapes, some of the figures black and some white. And my father would say, in this fantastic kind of magical realm, where if this took place, imagine how the people would get all excited and would think this is the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen, and they would show it off to other kingdoms, and how the people in this village, how their stock value in the realm of realms would go up. And our father would say, but imagine something, that these people had in their possession something of extraordinary value, something that could teach them about strategy, about lifemanship, and it would be the game of chess that had been found in the box. But rather like the Western society, he would say, rather than like the Occidental world, the people in the story, the people in the West, he would say, have stories, and they don't know how to activate them, and they don't realize that stories and storytelling have this extraordinary power within them, and that they sing to an ancient part of us